Hello, friends. As Lieutenant Governor of British Columbia, it is my honor to welcome you to the 6th Annual Indigenous Partnership Success Showcase. We gather on the territories of the Coast Salish peoples, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, and I thank them for their continued generosity in sharing these lands in peace and friendship. This summit reminds us prosperity grows through partnership. When we work together, we build stronger communities, create opportunities, and move forward in the spirit of respect and reconciliation. The conversations here show that reconciliation requires action. Through understanding, collaboration, and investment, we support communities and future generations. Thank you to the organizers, sponsors, and participants for your dedication. Whether you're part of the Leadership Summit or the gathering next door, I wish you a productive and inspiring event. Congratulations to everyone involved in the inaugural Shared Prosperity Awards this evening.
Hello, I'm Stuart McNish, and you're listening to Conversations Live. Conversations Live is a long-form public affairs dialogue series addressing the big issues of our time. For each episode, we bring together subject matter experts for a deep conversation designed to provide you with information that helps you make more informed decisions. I hope you enjoy it. Well, this is a special edition of Conversations Live, unlocking BC's economy through innovative First Nations partnerships. Today, we are coming to you from the Indigenous Partnership Success Showcase in Vancouver. And we also come to you from Kemkemalai, the land of many maples. These are the traditional territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish First Nations, who have lived on and continue to call these lands home. Osiam. Today, our objective is to examine and celebrate how innovative partnerships with First Nations are unlocking opportunities in the BC economy. An economy that, according to David Williams, the Vice President of Policy at the Business Council of BC, is shrinking. Real output fell by 1.8% last year, and that was on top of a 0.8% drop the year before. A combination of rules, regulations, and government meddling has stalled growth and discouraged investment in almost every sector. That is, except where innovative partnerships with First Nations are finding a path through the labyrinth. And that's what we're here to talk about this morning. Successful Indigenous partnerships that are and will continue to play a significant role in building our nation. Just a little bit about Conversations Live before we get started, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, and for those who are joining us live online on the Vancouver Sun. Conversations Live is a long-form public affairs dialogue series that seeks to advance our understanding of the big issues of our times. And there are some big issues that we're talking about today, aren't there? The relevance of this topic just continues to become more and more important and focused in light of recent court decisions, namely the Cowichan. Our goal is to share ideas and insights that help each of us gain a greater understanding of our communities, our province, and our country. There are many organizations that help us host Conversations Live, and I'm going to give them all a shout out because without them, we wouldn't be able to put this kind of program on. Our hosting sponsors and other sponsors, you'll see their logos scroll across the bottom of the screen as we're speaking today. Can't thank them enough. Our hosting sponsors are KPMG, RBC, and Macmillan LLP. Our annual sponsors are Digital, BD Developments, Polygon, Stem Cell Technologies, Helijet, Rennie, who are represented here with Bob Rennie on the panel today, Pacific Salmon Foundation, the TC Energy, Fortis BC, and Marquee Wines. And we have supporters such as BCIT, Falkirk, the Goodman Report, and OPI, as well as we're being supported today by the Indigenous Partnership Success Showcase. So we're kicking off the session this morning. Now, a couple of other things. I just want to make mention of our media partner, the Vancouver Sun, and our live streaming services are provided by Oh Boy Productions. I say without their generous support, we could not put on these conversations. Now, one last thing here, for those of you who are in the room or online, you can send in questions to me via Slido. If you go to Conversations Live on Slido, you can send in your question. I'll receive it. I can read it here, and I can share with the panel where it's possible. I may not deliver your question verbatim, but your questions will help form or shape some of the questions for today. So back to our topic today, focused on unleashing the BC economy through innovative partnerships with First Nations. We have a great panel of experts. Leo Wilson, down here at the end, is the Managing Director of the Corporate Finance Practice at KPMG here in Vancouver. Bob Rennie of Rennie Intelligence. Stephen Lee, the CEO of the Musqueam Capital Corporation. Jeff Mycock, the Chief Forester at West Fraser Mills, and Chief Derek Epp of the Chiacton First Nation. Derek, let me go to you first. Canada's budget was released just last week, I think it was, or in the last 10 days, and there's a lot of alignment, interestingly enough, with First Nations fiscal management, the Act, institutions, and what has been presented to the feds. When you saw the budget, what was the reflection, and what did it say about the role that First Nations are going to play in building this nation?
Yeah, no, thanks. Make sure this is on. Thanks, Stuart. Appreciate it. And good morning, everybody. Thanks, Deanna and Dallas, for welcoming us in such a good way as well. Yeah, for me, it was an alignment of our values, and where, a lot of the work that I do is all in the Fiscal Management Act institutions, the framework agreement. That's where I play politics. And, of course, you see some of the decrease in ISK funding, which was to be expected. Actually, it's less than I expected. But we also saw the alignment with the economy. And that's something that we keep pushing from the First Nations Fiscal Management Act lens and the framework agreement. For those of you who don't know what those are, they're all economic jurisdictions divulged to First Nations. So we have the tools that most of the society has been enabled to utilize over the last 100 years. So it's really about why those tools are so important. Is because it enables First Nations to unlock economies at a rate that we can actually move at in the speed of business. There's a couple key ones that we actually were really happy to see in the budget was the ability for the First Nations Finance Authority to lend to special purpose vehicles, i.e. limited partnerships, general partnerships. This will enable and support so many different infrastructure projects across Canada. We also saw the monetization of infrastructure funds. If you know what the infrastructure funds through ISK are, they're a cash pay-as-you-go system. They do about a $200 million a year budget that really is paid in cash per project. We're recommending you monetize those. We can monetize that to $2 billion and begin to close the infrastructure gap in Canada much quicker. And the last is a bonding and surety that we were really hopeful to get across the line as well, to really enable First Nations businesses to actually participate in these projects, because you have to be able to bond to actually participate in major infrastructure projects. And then from the Tax Commission lens, we were really supportive and glad to see that there was amendments to the tax legislation to support resource taxation, as well as looking at excise tax and things like casino taxes. And speaking of casinos, we're happy we bought one and it's public now, so hopeful we can implement those taxes as well. So it was really encouraging to see that the alignment with the federal government's economic values were with our institutions as well. Albeit, we can all probably argue about the federal budget in this room as well, but to actually see the ability for First Nations to have the tools that we need to participate is really encouraging. And as Stuart said, I think we have the ability to actually begin to speed up these processes, clear away with the red tape to make sure that we're actually moving at the speed of business to really close some of the major economic gaps that we have in Canada. I mean, I just drove from Chilliwack this morning. It took me 2.5 hours to get here. You want to talk about unlocking infrastructure? That's insane. To travel, I couldn't believe it, to travel 100 kilometers, it took me 2.5 hours. So really it's, a lot of these areas where we want to try to unlock economies. Well, I keep telling the government, get out of our way and allow us to do the work that we need to do, give us the tools, enable us to invest, and get out of our way.
Get out of our way. What an interesting comment to put it. Bob, when you take a look at the real estate market at the moment, the provincial and federal governments are getting in your way. How important is the development of relationships with First Nations if we want to unlock the real estate market?
picking up on what you just said of get out of our way, Evan Siddall, who previously ran CMHC, I phoned him a couple of weeks ago, and I said, you're putting together Canada bills, we're putting together BC bills here, and I said, why don't you get out of our way and find voids and gaps in the market? If we need one-bedroom rental in Vancouver under $1,600 a foot, or if we need family housing, we need seniors housing, just give the developer $200 a foot, as long as he provides something that goes into that solves one of the missing middle, whatever that is. And he said, no, Bob, he said, we have developers phoning us that will build for cost just to keep their employees going. And I said, they're lying to you. That's the first date. That's to get the contract, and then they're going to add 15% because of the bureaucracy involved in federal or provincial oversight. But these acronyms of Canada bills and BC bills, we have real problems, and we need partnerships. And you know, I no secret, I sit on Musqueam Capital's board with Stephen Lee, and going back 2013-14, a fellow named Dave Nagrin gave me a call and said, can you get Rich Coleman to meet with 3 chiefs? I believe it was Leonard George, Gibby Jacobs, and Wayne Sparrow, Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh, on a Sunday in a locked room with the Minister of Housing, and out came MST. So there's partnerships at work. Yes, you have your own lands too, but there's partnerships. And when I see the partnership opportunities that come to Musqueam, that come to MST, everybody's opportunistic. We are the belle of the ball right now. Nations is the belle of the ball right now, and we have to be very, very careful that our brand is not being diluted and we get into the wrong partnerships. But what government's doing right now in the province, the first 600 of 25,000 homes, if it works, will come out at 33rd and Heather at 40% below market. You will buy a modest, unfortunately it's the price, a modest 1-bedroom in the heart of Vancouver for $1 million. The consumer will pay $600, and the provincial government will put a $400,000 charge on title, but it's equity. On MST lands, the developer has 25% Aquilini, MST have the other 25% each. The consumer can now buy $1 million home in the city of Vancouver with $30,000 down. No CMHC fees because they're putting $30,000 down on the $600,000. This is an opportunity for frontline workers to stay in the city they work and middle incomes to purchase. So it's one of the best examples I've seen of a partnership working, and it might be the only true velocity in home ownership for the next couple of years while we figure out this economy.
Naturally, to you, Stephen, in the theme of get out of the way, and what can the Musqueam Nation, along with Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh, bring to the markets, and not just in real estate, but to markets that allow us to start to accelerate the rate at which we're going to be developing?
Yeah, thanks, Stuart. And you know, on top of get out of the way, and if you can't get out of the way, bring us along. Because really, as you said, Stuart, and the examples that were brought up, is that there are very creative ways that we can get involved, and not just involved from a tokenism perspective, but certainly get involved so that we can actually progress some of these initiatives. The Attainable Housing Initiative that Bob talked about is unique. It was a true partnership with the province, and also working with the municipality in order to bring that product to the market. But there are other examples as well in terms of our, for example, Musqueam-centric relationships with YVR and the Port of Metro Vancouver. Again, we're trying to resolve some of these issues in the sense of any industrial land crisis that the port's having, or any other business opportunities that Musqueam can really take a lead in. Just given the relationships that we've built up over time, whether it's with the municipal government, the provincial government, or the federal government. So times have changed so much in the sense that we are so far removed from when we started. When I started about 12, 13 years ago, we were talking about bid support letters for companies, or talking about accommodations. Now we're talking about equity participation, but not just a minor equity participation. It's like, in a lot of cases, we are leading a lot of the deals. So again, if we synergize all of that and just recognize the importance of not even getting out of the way, but being part of the solution and being a big part of the solution, we've gone from the driver's seat, or from the passenger seat over to the driver's seat.
Jeff, I want to turn to you because, we've talked about real estate, we've talked about infrastructure, but we also need to look at the resource sector and what you, West Fraser, and the Lake Babine First Nation have pulled together in working with the provincial government is truly extraordinary. Maybe you can explain what it is that you've done and how that helps to ensure certain access to fiber supply or timber supply.
You bet. Thanks, Stuart. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, it's, the theme of getting out of the way is interesting because, I wouldn't necessarily say that about our government colleagues and the work that we've done, but creating a space for ourselves to work proactively as a meaningful participant in a process is where we found ourselves several years ago now. So we started a conversation with Lake Babine in 2019. So 6 years ago, the idea was spawned to build a partnership where, we could see the path towards a future and working together in a more effective model with Lake Babine First Nation and all First Nations for that matter in British Columbia, where, they've got the connection to the land, they're the appropriate land manager, and we run a business. Our business depends on fiber, on wood fiber. We're a forest product manufacturer. Due to the evolution of the model of forest tenure and forest management in British Columbia, we have held obligations and held tenure over time. That model's become frayed, it's become broken. And First Nations have been, a last step in that process, and it's not working. We, through the work that we've done with Lake Babine, have put them into the driver's seat, supported them moving into the driver's seat, and that's the right place for them to be. We've got a lot of synergy. We've discovered through our journey together the sum of the parts, or the whole is greater, the sum of the parts is greater than the whole. And it's just been really fascinating. So what we've done is we came forward, we came to the table with tenure, and we supported Lake Babine to develop one of the largest area-based tenures in British Columbia that they hold through contributing our tenure to that end. And we've developed long-term partnership relationship with them to secure fiber from their tenure to operate our business. So we need each other. We depend on them and they depend on us, and together we've got a very fruitful and meaningful partnership. We're supporting each other in several ways, and we're helping them become more independent and develop more own source revenue for their community. And we just continue to discover more and more opportunity as we work together, as we understand each other, as our relationship builds. And we're doing this work as well with several other First Nations in British Columbia today. We're really excited about it. We really believe that this is the future to more investment, investor confidence, stability, community stability. All of that really comes into play here with the work that we're doing. So
just as a follow-up, you kept the mill operational as a result of this agreement or partnership at a time when even West Fraser is closing mills in the province of British Columbia. It's very significant.
Yeah, I think, that's a really good point. We didn't chase a problem. We looked for an opportunity to build success. And so this mill, as Pacific Inland Resources in Smithers, it's been a great business for many years. It's a great business today. We want it to be a great business in the future. And so by building this relationship, building this agreement has helped us to solidify and stabilize that business longer term. And the alternative of waiting for government to come up with a solution and not be a meaningful participant at the table working proactively with Lake Babine Nation didn't look good to us. And so by doing the work that we've done has really improved our confidence as a business. It's improved the confidence of other businesses, I think, in the community. And I think that's really the story here. So.
Yeah, it's making a big difference. Leo, first of all, Leo, thank you for jumping in today. I know that we originally had Catherine Pennington who was going to come down and join us, but she had a family issue that she had to attend to. Thank you for jumping in. You bring a unique perspective because you have been working and finalizing quite a number of partnerships. Give us a little overview of how busy you're becoming in this space and how the importance of having First Nations partnerships is becoming in the development of all business in British Columbia.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Stuart, panelists. I'm very privileged to be able to join the conversation today. I think at KPMG, I know that we've been supporting First Nations, Indigenous communities for many, many years. In our Indigenous advisory practice, we're looking to support across major projects, project finance, and operating businesses. And that's the operating business lens is really where my team sits. We look and help communities acquire or divest or raise capital for operating businesses. And so, as you mentioned, I've been fortunate to work with several nations, including Chief Derek Epp here, and also several others on the casino and gaming side. We've worked with nations acquiring forestry assets, but have been actually quite busy over the last number of months working on the buy side with Snuneymuxw and Petroglyph, as well as Tsleil-Waututh and the Chilwell tribes in the Fraser Valley, and there's several other discussions currently underway. So I think it's important to consider what that means from a partnership perspective, because it's not just about the dollars and the finances, it's about what the actual asset brings to community, and getting to know the actual communities that you're working for and how that can be diligenced and then invested within their community. We can help all the way along through the financing, diligence, and negotiations. And it really is a partnership opportunity, and it's not just a transactional event. And so that's where we've been fortunate is to, over time, build relationships and be invited to sit at the table to do this very important work and hopefully create meaningful change. I'll just sort of add on Chief, your comment there about capital. Accessing capital really is democratizing access to capital is unlocking the economic sovereignty in our perspective. And it's not just dollars capital. Sure, we can help finding grants, low-cost loans, guarantees, but it's also the human capital side. And that's something where we don't want to just be transactional. We're always looking to build capacity within the communities that we're working for. And so that means having economic development teams shadow us in the work that we're doing so that that skill set can be retained and built, because this is a long-term journey and we're not just here for the transaction. So that's been the very meaningful part of the work that we're doing as well.
So the rate at which people are now appreciating and embracing the need for partnerships is pushing people towards saying, okay, how do I get involved? It's interesting when Malcolm McPherson, I was talking to him earlier, he's talked about the speed of change around how quickly the investment community is recognizing this. What does it also highlight about our ability to accommodate all of these sudden inquiries, because they're coming in through First Nations? And I'll start with you, Leo, and then come to you, Derek, Stephen, and Bob. This is a topic that it's like, do we have the capacity to be able to respond to and realize the opportunities that are coming our way?
That's a fantastic observation and a critical juncture that we're at. Our view is that these projects are largely led by very sophisticated lenders, sophisticated joint venture partners, or majority or minority partners, and they move at the speed of deals, which sometimes is quite fast. And unless the counterparties are appropriately equipped to assess, is this a good deal, is this a bad deal, where should I allocate my resources? That is sort of the biggest question pending, and I think, having seen what Musqueam Capital Corp has done in building a team of advisors and board members has really enabled them to take advantage of a number of those opportunities. And we're seeing that happen with Chilwell tribes also building out capacity. I think that is going to be critical because there's only so much time and everything takes an opportunity cost. So having the right tools to be able to triage what is a good opportunity, where should we allocate our time, is critical.
Derek?
Yeah, no, great question. And I think Yeah, Leo kind of nailed it there. It's about capacity from our end as well, and building that capacity. And you look what happens when we can get involved in these projects. Leo mentioned it. Like we're not reinventing the wheel. We're copying MST and Musqueam Capital Corp in our valley as well. And why just try something new? But what that takes is actually revenue. It's bringing in sustainable revenue, being involved in the economy. I look at a couple examples recently about capacity as well. The Enbridge transaction for the West Coast Energy, we purchased 12.5%. There was 46 communities that had the ability to participate in that transaction, of which 38 actually ended up participating. Fantastic, in my opinion. That shows a clear sign of willingness. However, at that table we saw very quickly that we couldn't have 38 or 46 communities negotiating this deal. What we had to do was provide the necessary capacity to a transaction committee to actually execute the deal. So of the 46, we elected in 8 individuals. I was lucky enough to be one of those. A mix of chiefs who had the experience and background to actually participate in this transaction, with consultants, with financial advisors. We had a financial team, we had a tax team, we had a legal team, all supporting us along the way. So we didn't want to leave any of those communities behind that didn't have the capacity to actually participate at these tables. But what they're getting out of this is sustainable revenue that one day maybe they will. They actually now have an economic sustainable revenue that they can reinvest back in their own local economy. And I'm a big believer that you need business grade infrastructure and able to actually unlock your economy in your community. And that's critical. That's what's my community is our success. Why we've been able to invest in residential developments, commercial, light industrial, why we're able to buy land now and unlock the ATR process is because we've built an economy, because we took risks early on, and now we're actually being able to generate wealth and manage that wealth really sufficiently and being able to reinvest back in our economy. Same with the casino transaction. You know, we had our president, Chief David Jimmy. I was involved from time to time as well, but Chief David Jimmy is a high capacity leader as well, and we trusted him to take that lead on behalf of the 7 directors, with, of course, you know, help from the executive, myself included, and some others. But still, we made sure we put the right people in the right positions to make sure that we actually capitalize on these opportunities and move at the speed of business. And in turn, that supports, we call them, you know, there's the have and have not communities. Well, we want to make sure there's no longer those have nots. And they become like the Musqueams, like the Chiacton, like many of the communities in the room today.
Stephen?
Yeah, thanks, Stuart. So it's really interesting, the genesis of our nation and how Musqueam Capital came to be. It really wasn't a concept that we dreamed of. That concept has been there for thousands of years. And it was our past leaders and our elders that really envisioned how do we steward the future of our nation and how do we protect the generational wealth that we will create. And that really gave us a really nice head start in terms of how do we take that concept and activate that. When we activated it, at the core of all of this is strong governance. Not just governance in the sense of manuals and policies and things like that, but governance that really marries the values, the true values and the intent of our community, and how do you modernize that to Chief Derek Epp's point in terms of how do we then move at the speed of business. So it was a perfect hybrid in terms of all our lessons learned, all our values, all our teachings from our elders, how do we mobilize that into the Capital Corp. That being said, I think we still need to shout it from the mountaintops, because with our partners, it's important, extremely important that the alignment's there, as we've spoken of, because as Leo said, we're the furthest thing from transactions. We do not do transactions. Everything we do is relational, and everything we do is long-term. So we're looking out for generations into the future as opposed to that particular real estate deal or that particular transaction or acquisition. So I think the governance married with the true teachings and each nation's needs and priorities, if we synergize all of that, I think we've got a really strong foundation to build off of.
Bob, from your perspective, the ability to respond to the move towards looking at these kinds of partnerships, is the industry ready? Is the industry ready?
Well, the culture has shifted in, if I use the last 10, 11 years. When we went out for tender on the Fairmont, the old RCMP station at 33rd and Heather, and then the famous Jericho lands, there was 13 applicants. And it was Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and offering a 25% interest to a managing development partner. And under everybody's breath is who wants to be in bed with 3 family members that have the opportunity to not get along, and a skepticism. And then we look at today, if we look at Musqueam Capital, we've been there for 7 years, that we have governance. When we started out, it was Musqueam Capital would go to council, council would go to band, band would come back to council, council would come back to Musqueam Capital, and the deal was dead. It was gone. At the table we use, we're now in the Billionaire Boys Club, and we have to have governance, and we have to be operational in business the way the community wants us to. So I look at this stage, except yourself with nations, that 10 years from now, this will be an Indigenous intellectual stage, and we'll be sitting in the audience, and they may hire any one of us, but we won't be in the boardroom anymore because our job is to offer that business reconciliation. So now we see the BOSEs, and we see the Intercorps, and we see the Quadrilles wanting to be in our boardroom. That didn't exist 10 years ago. There's been a huge, huge shift in the acceptance that nations are now, no one's going to take advantage of them. This isn't the residential schools. Before it was, unfortunate for the language, but kill the Indian, save the man. Well, that has all gone. That's all shifting. And I just see in the last 10 years that evolution, and it's just a privilege to participate in it. But they have indigeneity, and nations have the respect now of the business community. But there's so much coming at us. It's like a fire hose of opportunities. So we have to make sure that we're not diluting our brand. We really are a value add, and what's in it for nations, not just what's in it for the development community before. And I believe that nations and land is going to be a huge solution to our housing problem and affordability, whether that be social housing, rental, or affordable home ownership.
Well, and I think that it also provides the same solution within the resource sector. But to use your wonderful phrase, a fire hose of opportunity, like there's so many areas that you have to focus in on. Do you at West Fraser have the capacity to go out and interact with all the First Nations that you need to negotiate with? And likewise, do those nations have the capacity at the moment to work with you to find more solutions that will give you certainty of supply?
It's a really great question and something we wrestle with every day. I think we do, and I can say that right now because things are moving at a very gradual pace, and it's a very strategic process. We're carving a new path, and we're just really at the early stages of that journey. And one thing we question though is, as this builds, and it will build and it will grow, will we have the capacity to keep up with it? And we're constantly thinking about how we structure ourselves, how we organize ourselves to effectively manage that and engage in these new processes. Just in British Columbia alone, we operate, the areas we operate in and that we draw fiber from on British Columbia's land base, there's 60 First Nations territories. So there's 60 First Nations communities that we're engaging with in some way. There's a spectrum of relationships that you could think about with each of those nations. Some of them, it is still today transactional, not because we want it to be, but because we haven't had the opportunity to evolve it from that space. And others, there's the Lake Babine example on the far end of that spectrum, and there's a bunch that are in between that we're moving along. But you can only move them at the pace that allows for success. We want long-term, enduring, successful partnerships and agreements. We're not interested in something, just to say, okay, we got it done, and then it's broken and it doesn't work tomorrow. So it's a very gradual, very strategic, very thoughtful process, and it's a longer journey that we're on. A lot of the communities are not ready for this work. Some are. We're working with those who are, and we're trying to bring in others along and support them to come to the table with us and do this work with us. And each one, we've got ideas for solutions, but we're using the relationships and the connections we have as a conduit for evolution. So, Lake Babine is a fantastic model, but it doesn't mean it's the only model. So, we're working with each nation on the nuances and the things that are specific to them. And, when I think about capacity, there's a lot of dynamics at play. I think, a lot of it is the size of the community, the proximity of the community, like where are they geographically. Some of the communities we work with are extremely remote and extremely small, and they tend to have a lot less capacity than some of the other ones that are, say, larger communities, closer to major centers. So there's all those things that affect the speed that we can move at and the work that we can get done. But we are on the journey, and we're getting there, and as we go, we'll adapt and we'll adjust to make sure that we've got the capacity for success.
So, in light of the fact that there are challenges within some communities, you're still focused more on building out those relationships than you are in developing other strategies in the province of British Columbia, because those relationships with First Nations provide a much more optimistic outcome.
Absolutely, yeah. That, historically, I was a chief forester for just under 10 years, and in the early stages of that, not very long ago, if you were challenged with, operating in British Columbia, challenged with policies or issues, you went to Victoria, you talked to the provincial government, and the provincial government would open the door, welcome us in, we'd work on committees, collaboratively, together on things. That's changed over time. It's very much government-to-government processes, and we're outside the room. And our First Nations friends and partners are the ones that are actually bringing us in the room now. And so the shift today for us, and we've seen this and we've moved towards it, has been more locally built solutions with communities overall, but in particular with First Nations communities, and building it from the ground up, starting there first. And that is really something that gets us energized. We're pretty passionate about it. We believe it's the right path. And then, government, to their credit, is supporting us in that work as well. And really, we're giving them, together with the First Nations communities, what they're looking for and what they're indicating that they want. So they're supporting it, they're facilitating it, and, I hesitate to say getting out of the way, but they are allowing the work to happen.
Bob, I see you nodding, and you want to jump in here. So, Derek and Leo, I know that you've got something you want to say.
We're all saying, though, is that there is a social currency to working with reconciliation. There's no social currency in trying to accelerate a transactional agreement with Amazon or with Lululemon. But when you're ticking off another box and that social currency exists, you have governing bodies' attention. So you can accelerate and a deal moves along quicker. So dealing with nations, there is that you become a favored nation is you can take 2 years out of a transaction, and that's very valuable to nations and very valuable to a partner. I just want to bring up that social currency word. It's very important, I think, on this stage.
Good point, Derek.
Yeah, I think some really good points, and I think it goes back to what Jeff was saying about localized solutions. I think that's so critical to what you're seeing a lot of success in our individual territories as well, and it goes from both, our individual communities' lenses where we have a lot of ideas and solutions for infrastructure needs or housing, but we've also solved our own solutions with our governance systems as a tribe, similar to what Squamish and MST has done as well. And but we, as a Chilkowiak tribe, we've made a decision that we are going to respect the autonomy of our individual Indian Act bands to function and build their economic growth, and also support each other with additions to reserves. So when we acquire land and it's touching a reserve land base, we're going to support one another. We're not going to get in each other's way. But there's opportunity where at the Chilkowiak tribe, and if you know Chilliwack, you know that we need more housing, we need more schools, same with anybody else's city that you live in. That's where the Chilkowiak tribe has now said, we can step into that space. But what the crux of it now is, I've been building a relationship with the city of Chilliwack. And if you're from Chilliwack, I mean, our casino transaction, I wish you could see Facebook. It's horrendous, to be honest. But there's a couple, actually people trying to educate people on who we are. And the fact that a lot of people are saying, oh, the government just paid them to buy the casino. Well, no, we're using real money, real risk, real investments. And now we're trying to align that with the city of Chilliwack, because when I unlocked Pandora's box of additions to reserve in Chilliwack. I was able to do one in 6 months. It was unheard of. Typically took 3 to 30 years to do one. Now it's really sped up the clock on the ability for First Nations to buy, add it to reserve, and begin to develop. Now the fear was we're just going to buy it and slam condos everywhere. Well, I bought 50 acres 2 years ago. To Bob's point and everybody, real estate's risky. So we're kind of buying our time, making sure we're bringing in the right strategic partner, building out what the market needs and what our membership needs. But at the same time, we're trying to acquire more. But the city of Chilliwack's biggest fear is infrastructure. How are we going to pay for water, wastewater? And most people don't know that most of my taxes that I collect off my reserve goes back to the city to pay for that. So we actually are paying our fair share, but I understand where we need to plan for 15, 20, 25 years down the road. So we're talking about that now. The questions to the city is, well, I can build a wastewater treatment plant. I'll put a business plan together. I'll start collecting taxes from you. And that's the shift in the relationship now that's happening, and they're open. Actually, the city's open to these dialogues and localized solutions. I have a meeting in a week from today with mayor, council, it's very political in these stages to talk about that. A top-down mandate to all of our staff within our organizations to say, make this happen. This is for the betterment of the city of Chilliwack. This is for the betterment of the Indigenous people from the city. And actually, we're going to be able to provide schools, turf soccer fields, turf baseball fields, whatever it may be that the city needs, because without us, unfortunately, they're landlocked in a lot of the scenarios where we can actually unlock land that they can't. So now it's about these localized solutions. And again, it's maybe getting government out of the way was a bit harsh, but it's a bit of, making sure, I think the theme more is proponents, industry, First Nations have solutions. Now it's about supporting those solutions and actually enabling us to move at the speed of business so we don't have carrying costs or these fees that bury developments these days when it takes 4 years to get a permit to build an apartment. Well, that'll bury anybody in this industry. So really we're trying to make sure that we set the stage to really meet the evolving needs of not just my community, but the city of Chilliwack.
Leo.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to sort of provide an observation and Chief Derek Epp and Chief David Jimmy, I think so grateful to have this youth leadership at the level where they're so engaged in the business community. And I know a number of the projects we're talking about here are Enbridge billion-dollar projects or large real estate projects, but I think we also have to think about how we can support building that education at the community level up, because you don't just build an economic development group with a few corporate finance development individuals and onboard them. I think you need to build it up with the whole community understanding business, and sort of want to applaud the work of First Nations Bank of Canada and BDC and the work that they're doing to really enable youth entrepreneurship within communities. And so I think that'll be a fantastic, hopefully that sort of comes up alongside the work that's being done within communities and economic development. And like you said, within 10 years, there's sort of a different representation in many of these conversations. So just wanted to add that and say thank you for the amazing leadership that you're doing here.
So what's interesting, of course, if we take a look over the last 50 years, going court cases from Sparrow through to Delgamuukw, Haida, Silcotin, and now Cowichan. And Cowichan has really highlighted in many ways what we have to do to work together to ensure that everybody, because in an interview that I did with Joe Alphonse, the chief of the Silcotin Nation a number of years ago, he said, nobody's going anywhere. We got to figure this out. And in light of Cowichan, how much more important is it that we build partnerships? Stephen, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah. Well, needless to say, I mean, bluntly put, it was such a gut punch with regards to the ruling that came down, because it really, it decimated what we're all standing for and what we've protected for time immemorial. And it wasn't just about the land, it was also the fishing rights that impacted Musqueam more than anyone else. So back to the point of awareness and understanding, the colonial ways in terms of trying to settle things through the courts have really diluted everything that we've stood for, which is basically through the longhouse, through the understanding of nation-to-nation relationships. So, that being said, it's the awareness. I mean, the circus that just went on in Richmond, if I can call it that, with regard to the fear-mongering that was involved there. It casts doubt into everything. Now we're talking about, financeable or non-financeable taxation and so on. Really, I mean, this tenure, this land tenure and Aboriginal rights and title has been in existence for forever, and it has coexisted. So really what's happening now is just an awakening in terms of how do they coexist and how have they coexisted, rather than throwing wrenches into it. Just get a true understanding of what that means for the nation, what that means for business partners. And Leo is absolutely right. Our alignment with business partners isn't just picking names out of a hat or what's the rosiest opportunity. It's really around, do you understand our outcomes? We understand your outcomes. And from that comes a true alignment and a long-term partnership.
Well, we need those partnerships. There's no doubt about it. A number of years ago, in an interview that I had with Perry Bellegarde when he was the national chief at the Assembly of First Nations, he said something that I think is extraordinary, and it really fits with today's theme. He said, if you can't build partnerships, you can't build anything. And this is at the key of where we're at. It's so like at the core of what you're doing with West Fraser and so many different First Nations. How do you go about building those partnerships? What is the process that we're now moving into new territories with certain nations, that this is new to them, also still new to you?
It starts with trying to understand each other's needs. And it's relationship 101, principle-based and aligning on what those principles are. And those principles, if well established and well thought out and well understood, will guide the process for many years to come. And so, it's really coming in without any prejudice, without any preconceived conditions, maybe some ideas to put on the table, but welcoming ideas from both parties and seeing where those interests can converge and align and starting to build on something. And it requires participation in activities and events that are outside of that specific discussion to build deeper understanding and trust on both sides. And it's a long journey. It's not something that, at least in our case, it doesn't happen within 6 months or a year. It's a longer term process, and it requires patience. And sometimes it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and you just got to keep working and see where you can get to. But that's really it starts with relationships, as we've heard several times today, and then trying to get to a place where you need to be aligned in where you're going and how you're going to get there, and what's going to guide you. And you need to be thinking about what's going to go wrong, what can go wrong, and how do we deal with it when that happens.
So Bob, you talked earlier about the fact that this isn't just transactional. These are social contracts.
Taking Steve's word, it's all a longhouse still, but it's White Spot, it's Starbucks, it's in their boardroom. It's all about communication. But there's something different today is, in nations, it was always the spoken word and transferring of information and handshakes. And now, if you just look at when you were talking about Facebook, there's such anger out there with social media that what happened in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, there was advocacy and lobbying and some level of fairness. But now there's such hate out there that whether we're talking about reconciliation or we're talking about trans or we're talking about policing, it sounds like we want superiority. All we wanted to be was included. All we wanted to, it was to, when you hear Deanna talk about Squamish and going out on the water and they have to watch their village burn down in 1913. Well, it's time for reconciliation, but I sat with one of our political leaders, and I shouldn't say John Rustad's name, but I will, and he said he's going to tear up DRIP. I thought, you don't even know who you're talking to me. You met me for 15 minutes. And thinking that that's something I'd want to hear, that it might make more money in real estate if we ended this. But we have to fight differently because of all the hate that's out there. And no one's asking for superiority, but we've been able to politicize everything as, I can't imagine what's on your Facebook, that it's you want superiority, you're getting a free ride, rather than no, we're going to be very good partners and we're going to help with solutions. I just thought I should throw that in.
Okay, so we got about 10 minutes left here, and what I really want to focus in on is where do we go from now? As I mentioned earlier, when I talked to Malcolm McPherson, we talked about the speed at which these relationships are accelerating, the depth and the opportunities. From your perspective, what are the key elements that you want to be watching, not in the next 5 years, but in the next 1, 2, and 3 years? What's going to change? Where are we going to be at? Stephen, can I start with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So as it was mentioned by Chief Derek Ept at the outset, is that the whole infrastructure, if you will, or the environment has to keep pace with where the nations are going, and access to capital is a huge one. And having that access to capital, reducing that red tape, really it's the other way now. It's kind of like making sure that the bureaucracy doesn't get in the way of progress, and all these are key factors in terms of whether you're a nation that's just starting off or whether you're a nation that are looking at now billion-dollar deals. Those are all facilitators, if you will, and enablers. We really got to take a solutions-based approach to it, whereas it was a bit about win or lose. And now it's working together in terms of how do we get there. And I think the First Nations Finance Authority, the First Nations Bank, all those initiatives that are taking place are just enabling these opportunities. So for us, the vision's pretty clear. We want to keep moving forward in what we've started, and we won't stop until our communities are looked after for forever. So having said that, we need the collaboration of the financial institutions. We need the collaboration of the government to make sure that they don't get in the way. And how do we help and how do we provide the solutions to get there?
So, Derek, to the topic of access to capital, at one point it had been presented to me that until there's a change in the Indian Act, that's going to be very, very difficult for First Nations to have that access to capital. Is that an outdated argument now?
No, I think there's a lot of options, and the key is options. We have a lot of options now, and even through this last Enbridge deal as well, we were able to submit a bond and go through that process, a senior bond and a guaranteed bond. They were oversold, overprescribed. And that's talk about social credits. It's a lot of the ESG frameworks that we tick a lot of those boxes in any investment that we're a part of. So even from the FNFA, we started our first debenture for a bond was, I think, $50 million. And now we've done like $1.2 billion so far this calendar year in debentures. So now the access to capital is becoming, much more, we have, like I said, we have options. We have ability to actually access various levels of capital to meet our needs. And is it perfect? No. I think if you look at more the macro scale, it's becoming easier. But if you look at the individual scale, there's still issues with First Nations communities who don't have the jurisdictions my community does to get a mortgage, really to leverage your asset of your land on reserve. So there's, the individual access to capital is still a hindrance, but I think if you're looking at these large infrastructure projects or capital needs of consortiums of community, it's there, there's options are there, but we just need to continue to expand what I call the First Nations economic toolbox to enable us to have all the same tools that anybody else has had the ability to play with. Well, I just want those two. I want to be able to play with every single tool that anybody has been able to play with in the past and use it to my community's benefit, but also to the greater good's benefit as well. And I think one example I'm working on in Manitoba that I think can be relevant in BC is looking at, northern Manitoba is rich with critical minerals as well. And part of the need is looking at mining projects. And I'm working with the provincial government, the federal government, the local First Nations to try to get the permitting done at a local level. So it actually takes that permitting away from the federal government, puts it in the hand of the First Nations communities. Some of the land actually becomes their tenure, their jurisdiction, their oversight. They are collecting taxes from that industry. They're collecting revenue sharing, whatever that may be, and that project becomes theirs and actually will speed up the permitting process exponentially and will actually support an economic boost in that northern Manitoba community that is so needed, not just for the First Nations, but for anybody living up there. So there's solutions, and it's looking at capital as one of the biggest solutions that I think we've been able to overcome in the last decade or so, and I think continuing to fill that economic toolbox will just continue to reap the benefits of Canada's economy as well.
So what is one of those tools that you wish you had right at the moment but don't?
Tax jurisdiction, I think, is one of them. Is like, because fundamentally as governance, we're no different than any municipality, province, or federal government. We need government like revenues, i.e. taxation, for long-term 7-generation sustainability. There still is so many caps on the taxes that I can actually collect individually. I get punished. If I collect too many taxes, the federal government takes it from me. Still, because even though they're not collecting it, but if I make too much, they take it. So that's, I think, one of the fundamental issues that I'm working on right now at a national level is, and why I was thankful to see in the budget that there's actually talk about this now, because to me it's, I'll be blunt, it's bullshit. Maybe I'll leave it there.
Oh, you're not allowed to say that. Leo.
Yeah, just to add on that, I think given the access to capital is happening. I think FNFA, FNBC, BDC, other lenders, loan guarantees, grants, I think that has opened up significantly in the last 10 years. I think now we're in this opportunity triage phase where we don't yet have the capacity, the human capital capacity within communities to assess which projects are the right ones for those communities. And so I would encourage nations to design their guardrails, really assess what they're willing to take on, what they're not willing to take on. And then that way, when they have projects coming across their desks or are shown them through advisors or invited to JVs or partnerships, they can more efficiently, again, it's not going to be perfect, but more efficiently say, you know what, look, we're not interested in that, but we're more focused on this type of project. And at least that helps to cut through the noise because there is access to capital. The worst thing that could happen is you just do a deal because you want to do a deal and having done a deal. And again, there's a lot of opportunity cost and time and effort that goes into financing, diligence, and then operating or participating in a project. So I just caution on the opportunity cost and the time allocation, but we are entering a phase here where there's so many opportunities and understanding the good ones from the bad ones, and find your trusted advisors to give you the straight goods on what the project is, right? I think, bring it down to the right level that it can be digestible and find someone who you can have that frank conversation with.
Bob, what are you looking forward to as far as continued movement along this path of partnerships with First Nations here in British Columbia?
Well, I think no different than Steve and I talk in the boardroom is really making sure that we're recognized for our ability, our land holdings, but we're not going into anybody else's transactions unless it's equitable for the two of us. And I think there's been I've talked on it a few times tonight, but to make sure that the industry understands our ability and what we bring to the table. And I think that's the shift it's even happening right now. I don't think we finished the Cowichan conversation because we can't. It's in the courts.
It's unfolding.
And people like Malcolm Brody just gaslit it. And so there's a misread all over the place on it. And that might be setting us back for a little while. But I'm just looking for the point to where we get that it's a level playing field, and our ability to perform on our land, or our ability to bring our brand to your table using Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, or any nation is respected, no different than entering with KPMG, getting into a deal. You don't question their brand at all. You question their fees.
Value for service.
Sorry.
Jeff, what do the next couple of years look like for you in the forest?
Well, I think time is definitely not on our side, as most people would recognize. The forest sector in British Columbia is in a crisis today, And, we really see the path forward to be more agreements, more work with First Nations communities and partners like what we've done with Lake Babine. Really, again, it's important that we move at the right speed, but if that speed could be faster, it would be better right now. And so I think, looking forward to 2026, you can expect to see more agreements coming out like we've done with Lake Babine, and we just need to keep building those out and growing and, building on that success. It's going to be key to stabilizing fiber security and certainty for investment in the sector, going forward. So looking forward to growing that business model, and other, companies will be doing the same thing. They are doing the same thing or similar things today, and that's really what has to happen to stabilize our future in this business.
Well, I wrap up this conversation feeling quite encouraged about the role partnerships with First Nations are going to play in unlocking the BC economy, because I think one of the driving factors for me in my commitment towards reconciliation over the years is that we want to provide opportunities for all people to realize their potential. And when that happens, in the words of Aristotle, everyone benefits. Everyone benefits when when nobody's held back. And if we can find these ways, and especially through the unique opportunities that exist with First Nations, we can get government a little bit out of the way and move forward and really work on building this nation. Thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you for joining us online, and thank you for joining us here in the room. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into Conversations Live, an Oh Boy Productions program. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can find our previous and upcoming episodes at conversationslive.ca. You can also follow us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. Again, thank you. I'm Stuart McNish.